Thanks for staying with us. You're listening to Smooth 98.1 FM Lagos, and this is Freshly Pressed 981. Well, we'll give you the detailed analysis of our newspaper stories this morning. And joining Folu, myself, Valentine, to do justice to these stories.
Yes.
Our birthday celebrants for today.
Yes. Ayo Esho,
Happy
happy
birthday.
birthday.
Thank you very much. Thank
Good
you very
morning.
much.
He's
Good
all
morning.
smiles, Lagos. Please tweet at him at Ishaw1 and wish him happy birthday on behalf of us. And then we welcome Tunde Okufi. Good morning. Morning.
Morning, Valentine.
That's for WhatsApp. You can also leave the comment 981 FM Lagos. Also on Twitter at Smooth981 FM. Use that hashtag freshly pressed 981. Our first story is from Punch newspaper. Wike locks horns with EFCC over fresh probe into Rivers finances. So the governor, Nyesom Wike of Rivers State, apparently locking horns with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, who are investigating the Rivers State government for alleged cash withdrawals totaling 117 billion naira. In this story, they said there were curious withdrawals that violated the Money Laundering Prohibition Act, according to the EFCC. But Wike, the Rivers State governor, in reply said that no official of the Rivers State government will appear before the EFCC when they are called upon, because he said this is politically motivated. The investigations that are carried out that are politically motivated, that until the commission approached the Court of Appeal.
Somebody should investigate, but it smells like politically motivated also to me. But that's just my opinion.
I mean, we saw how the EFCC's antics and going after Fayose right after the elections, and one would expect that this kind of practices would actually come in after the tenure,
especially when you
governor.
Especially when you consider the fact that he has immunity, although they're saying he's not the one that they're inviting for now. This the Mr. Fubara that is and saying that is going to be invited in, but like you said, I think the best thing that they should have done is get their investigation done, continue with their work off camera, if I can use that term, and then wait till the election. If you get re-elected again, okay, but you can bring it up after election, so we don't assume that there's anything sinister about your. For me, I smell political.
Undertone.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Ayo. Moving on to this next story, New Telegraph has this one. New Telegraph newspaper says Kaduna government imposes 24-hour curfew on troubled communities, according to not New Telegraph, but Premium Times. So the Kaduna state government has imposed a 24-hour curfew on Kwaru and Ugwanyero communities. They said the two were affected by violence. The community members, some of them who were interviewed, according to this report, said the fresh attacks by suspected gang members on Sunday evening was a sort of a revenge on the killing of one of its members. Tunde, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, if a scenario is ungovernable or has reached the kind of levels as described here, then it only makes sense to place a curfew on it until normalcy can be. I mean, my thoughts as there's violence and criminality all across the country, and such and such, or it was this type of attack or that type of attack, because it's from within the same community, it can only be described as as gang behavior, right? And it's a reflection that crime and criminality is rife in many areas, and we really need to up how we deal with it.
Yeah.
And it's multifaceted.
Here's what worries me though, Tunde, because I mean, these communities have been experiencing, like you mentioned, the herdsmen crisis, as they were tagged, quote unquote, and some other, Boko Haram attacks, really. And we've noticed over time, through the collection of intelligence by the military, we've seen that, situations have been cited where members of these communities have been recruited into some of these militant bodies or groups or whatever you might want to call it. But I mean, shouldn't the leaders be looking into unifying the communities to make sure that there's peace existing? So it's not as porous as
it's a short-term palliative, to deal with the situation. But a long-lasting solution has to look at the underlying issues.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tunde, for that one. We'll move on now to this next story from Guardian newspaper. Federal government leaving in denial of wobbly infrastructural policy on Lagos, and this is in reaction to the recent test that was carried out on Third Mainland Bridge for 3 days. So the latest closure and reopening of the popular Third Mainland Bridge in Lagos has been generating reaction. Some people saying, some observers saying that, I mean, 2008, it was also shut for a few months as well. And now this time around, they're carrying out the 3-day test. People are anxious and scared that this might just, put a halt to commercial activities, especially within that axis, and just, cause trouble, increased traffic situation to commuting.
They're saying that it's basically because of the collapse of the bridge in Italy that this investigation was done. I don't think so, because
that's completely erroneous, because the announcement had been made well before
exactly. So I really don't like it when this kind of things are done. Normally, before you do any form of repairs, you need to investigate to know exactly what you're doing. So this is what the first phase of a collapse of the Third Mainland Bridge is going to be.
Considering the major concern in this happening, almost showing glaringly to the world how porous our borders are. How do 4,000 people get into the country without any checks?
Well, remember that they're kind of refugees, okay? So That's don't hinder refugees from coming in. And I would like to remind Nigerians, the Southern Cameroon case that looks like the entire world doesn't really care about is still ongoing. It's been there for over a year now, and the world doesn't really care. It's a painful thing. Now this Southern Cameroon, let's remind ourselves, we're part of Nigeria. At independence, okay? So let's remember that. And they're still a part of us, kind of, because they're the ones that speak English. And I don't know why, for some reasons, this clash keeps going on. I mean, before this genocide, so to call it, was happening, they've been kind of deprived of so many other things compared to the francophone part of the country. And in 2000, which constitute like 17% of their population, and what worries me is the world turns the other eye, like as if nothing is happening over there. There's nothing wrong with us taking in these people. Yes, I understand what you mean by us saying that we have porous borders. What we should be thinking of is how to probably create a place in which to put them in and make sure that we cater to them. This is our responsibility.
Let's take a look at this though. We have been seeing issues arising from the influx of refugees in places in Cross River as well, in the Boki community area, and that has been problematic. And when you take a look at the fact that we have so many internally displaced people ourselves, the worry then becomes how the resources are going to be managed. Are they not going to be stretched thin? And because as a country we are in a position or a place right now where we're struggling to keep the status quo, and the status quo is not the best. And so how do you reconcile that? How do you tell the people in the community in Taraba who do feel that they are being invaded, whose resources are being stretched?
I understand that, but we need to be humans first before we become
981. MI from Akoka says the EFCC always chooses a very interesting times to open investigations. This one is far from fortuitous. While Ozigi up on WhatsApp says, why are Nigerians like this? Everybody's hiding under the political shade, doing all sorts of nonsense. An agency of government is trying to check those of us who should know, and yet will say it is politically motivated. It is so sad, and we may never get it right. While Yinka says, bros, no one is saying that the bridge shouldn't be maintained, but we need to ask questions. Bridges could be then the original builders. Anyways, let's keep it moving. Up next, let's talk some business news, shall we? Tunde, coming to you for this one. The equities market rebounds on bargain hunting and gains 0.45%. So that's last week, the equities market within the Nigerian Stock Exchange. The all-share index gained 5%. 3 days due to the public holiday, and there was a price appreciation in Dangote Cement PLC, and that's what lifted the positive performance for the week. Today, a number of people have been a bit worried about the downward spiral or decline sort of in the stocks recently. A lot of it has been influenced by what's going on in the political space. But what's your take on this story?
So perhaps the shorter, trading days is more a reflection of, especially this bump. And when you look at the story, Dangote Cement is what has accounted for the slight the market closing positive. And if you look at the proportion of the market, that is Dangote Cement, you realize that when that stock moves, the market moves. stock markets usually aspects of the economy. And you look at this report, it shows that the banking sector is down, manufacturing is down, and a bunch of other sectors are down, and it's a reflection of the economy and investor confidence as well. Considering the political climate next year's effects, portfolio investors, it's a good stock, but it had been depressed. So people went for it knowing that the fundamentals are right. It's going to rise. So this probably is the best time to buy. And when the smoke clears and we can see a little clearer in the direction we're going, the prices start to rise again, and you make a fair profit.
This is totally unrelated, but as you said smoke cleared, I thought about the report I got earlier this morning that
2019. What's your take on it?
So this country is an interesting place. It's just unfortunate. It's mostly tragic. National. I don't see. It's beyond me as to how we can say that we were operating for 2 different years in one reality than this. I think you'd be hard pressed to find it. The excuse.
And I'd like you. This is the case. If that was the plan, right? To split since the 20 into effect. Why was this so hard to communicate earlier this year? Why allow this sort of long drawn process of newspaper headline battles?
Which is why I say it's hard. It's a creative response. I mean, because if this was the case, it would have been presented as such. It would have been easy to respond to, the first time around. It's taken a couple of weeks for us to come up with this.
Okay. Speaking, find this across several national papers. He says, and I quote, "Let national interest and security rather than rule of law guide your." Now, this was specific context, and let let's not just freak out. It does make sense to some point. This was brought up during the 58th annual conference of the Nigerian Bar Association. He said that the rule of law can only be optimally practiced in a peaceful environment, and so all lawyers and Nigerians must be understanding that the rule of law must obey security and national interest. Now, I'm going to stop there and come to you, Ayo, for your thoughts, especially when we look, because at this point I think comparative law is very important, and when we look at countries that are perhaps most effective in peacekeeping globally, let's call the United States, and even the efficacy of their peacekeeping is questionable, considering that everywhere they've gone to keep the peace is something that they heard. But what do you make coming out to say this?
What's good is, even in those kind of cases, there are still rules of engagement. So I'm very sorry.
Don't be
it's
sorry.
so far.
Why just
No,
tell us
because
why you
it's the
think
president. I need to give him some respect here. But it's fallacious to even state this, to say that the rule of law must be subject. You need to get something here.
Why is it fallacious? Why?
Okay. The rule of law itself maintains or kind of holds the supremacy of the country itself. So when you have a constitution which was agreed by a set of people, in this case Nigerians, maybe not exactly, but because we're just given in 1999, but let's leave that at that. Best thing to do at that moment, it's okay, but you should understand that that is responsible for it. The reason we have 3 arms of government, for 2 at least, to check one at every interval. What happens in Nigeria as of today is that the executive has become too powerful, where you have the Senate and the judiciary saying that this shouldn't be done. When judiciary and the legislative say A is the answer, and the executive says no, because they're the ones that are meant to execute what that's.
Okay, Tunde,
why can't you just update the laws to suit the current rules?
Now here's something to point out. In most constitutions, including ours, for a lot of the provisions that people say perhaps our federal government has violated, and this is outside of court rulings, right? So I'm not talking worsens Nigeria's non-oil exporters. say that local non-oil exporters may have started feeling the heat of that trade war between the global economic leaders, and this is because although projections from the international trade bodies showed the average tariffs on exports from Nigeria and countries like Zambia might not go beyond 10%, but affected businesses are already saying there's slow demand and delayed payments from China. Tunde?
Yeah, and that's, as China tries to manage its dollar reserve. We're not alone in this. I mean, it's global. The effects of the U.S. China trade war is affecting some neighboring Asian countries that neighbor China as well, or large trading countries in that region, Singapore, of what goes when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers, and in this instance we're in the grass category. It's just like when there was war between shale oil from fracking and regular crude oil, and it went to a price war. We, the grass, suffered because we're not at the table when those kind of we're part of OPEC, but through when the world powers start to fight and jostle over something, we just suffer the consequence. So what I would like is for us to be in greater control of our destiny, right? We should have more of a buffer. The story points out that trade within Africa, it mentions, I think Zimbabwe, is going to be below a certain percent. This is the reason why we need to get on that African trade agreement. I know we've signed it. I hope we finally signed it. But all the arguments back and forth. This is why we need to insulate ourselves a lot more.
Yes.
That's how you protect again. That's how you upgrade from being grass, right? But that's the current situation. Let's hope Donald Trump doesn't burn the
Donny.
I just hope the Americans do the right thing in the next election.
On Twitter, we have this message from Chika Gina. It says, the crisis in southern Cameroon is another indication that Nigeria, West Africa, and Africa as a whole has failed its citizens. Imagine Paul Biya seeking another tenure after 36 years of monumental failure. Hashtag freshly pressed. Tunde Okufi says, there's no context in which advocating for the suspension of the rule of law is excusable. These jokers are trying to turn the Fourth Republic into the Fourth Reach.
Right.
All right. Ayodele, thank you very much. Ayodele says, but hey, we do not vote for the judiciary. What do we do then?
Yeah, but you do vote for your lawmakers,
Yes,
so
you
you can
do.
ask for certain things to be done.
Comrade Ifenuga says, the same EFCC has refused to investigate Oshomole tenure, despite a petition to the EFCC detailing allegations of corruption since 2016. Even now, EFCC has been dragged to court to investigate the allegation. The EFCC should not be a political tool being used against opposition. Thank you, Comrade Ifenuga. And that's about the much time we have for Freshly Pressed 981 today. Sending your messages on Twitter to our analysts and to us as well, Smooth 91 FM at eShow1. Happy birthday again.
Thank you very much.
And at Big Hoofs. Lagos coming up next, we talk sports inside of the locker room. Keep it here, Smooth 91 FM.
Get quick access to loans from Page Financials. Page Financials.
Hey, thanks guys.
All right.
Excellent.
All right.
Right, that's funny. What guy? Very shy. He's a poet. That's right.
Have a wonderful